One very simple way to look for associations is to do so visually. For example, here we can see the number of birds seen by different visitors as we did in previous examples, but we can also see the number of hours each person spent at Kiwiland on the other axis. This allows us to explore whether there's an association between the number of hours a person spent at Kiwiland yesterday and the number of birds they saw. When we look at the overall pattern, in general that does indeed appear to be the case. People who spent more time on the island tended to see more birds, and people who spent less time on the island tended to see fewer. The line shows that overall trend. If we want to express that association more formally, we can do so using a correlation coefficient. Correlation coefficients vary between -1 and 1. A value of 0 means that there's no relationship between the variables. If that was the case here, we'd expect people to just be randomly distributed all over the place with no pattern to it at all. A value of 1 means that there's a perfect positive correlation, which in turn means that when one goes up, the other goes up by exactly the same percentage. So here we'd expect everybody to be lined up in a perfect line trending upward this way. A value of -1 means that there's a perfect negative correlation, which in turn means that when one goes up, the other goes down by exactly the same percentage. So there we expect everybody to be in a perfect line, but the line would be going down this way. Previously we saw that as the number of hours spent on Kiwiland goes up, the number of birds visitors saw tends to go up too. However, we can see that the correlation between the two isn't perfect, and we can see that by these people all spent the same number of hours at Kiwiland, but they didn't see the same number of birds. So that tells us that the correlation isn't perfect. When one goes up, the other generally does, but not always and not in the exact same proportion. Those things are reflected in the correlation coefficient, which is 0.84. That's positive, showing that the two do vary together and in the same direction, and 0.84 is pretty high, but it's not perfect.